A lot of us tend to overestimate our readiness and underestimate the competition. One of the reasons that I started Factum Global is because I saw a significant gap in the market where many organizations that were eager to expand globally truly lacked that systematic approach to do it.
I sometimes see big population biases. So if you're a US firm, well, why would we enter Canada? It's so small when we can enter China or Brazil or India.
To me, success is truly accomplishing what the client wants to do in a way that's realistic, that reduces risk, increases their chance of success and their ability to generate impact.
If you go to Italy, there's a pizza place literally every block. So it's a pretty tough sell to say, well, we have the global brand, and then the Italians will come to us.
Feasibility studies, market selection, thinking about who your competition is, understanding the local laws and regulations, all of that initial work is truly the foundation for success.
Welcome to the second episode of Consulting Confidential, and I have here Francisco Gomez, who is the CEO of Factum Global, which is an international market entry firm. So they help companies, grow from one geography and their home geography to other geographies, other countries, and ideally globally. Thank you so much, Francisco, for making the time. I'd love to hear more about how you started Factum Global, and also what got you into consulting in the first place.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you. I'm Francisco Gomez, CEO of Factum Global, and we specialize in helping businesses expand across borders, whether it's entering new markets, building partnerships, transforming from within. We help organizations thrive globally. We act as a guide, as a strategist, as an execution partner for companies that are navigating the complexities of international growth.
That makes sense. And we actually met via Jeff, I think, at the American Society for Association Executives. So that's more the industry association for industry associations. But I know that you play across a number of other industries. Are there particular ones you focus on, or?
Yeah, we are, because of the nature of what we do, we're industry agnostic. So we serve a variety of clients from different disciplines and different sizes. So we do a lot of work with associations, nonprofit organizations, foundations.
Okay.
But we also work very closely with companies in the technology sector, healthcare, telecommunications. It's truly a wide array of companies that we serve.
Cool.
About 50% of our portfolio are U.S. companies that are expanding international. And the rest are companies from outside, from other parts of the world that are either trying to enter the United States or trying to go to a third market.
Yeah, and I bet the concerns going, U.S. outbound versus rest of world to the U.S. are vastly different. Are there particular peculiarities of either direction that you found over the years, or?
The process is essentially very similar, right? I mean, you think about whether it's a foreign company that's trying to enter the U.S. or is a U.S. company going abroad. The first thing is to understand whether or not you're ready to do it. And whether or not you should do it. So we've developed a proprietary maturity model that allows us to measure international readiness for our clients across variables such as people and systems and processes and culture, finances, to really help them understand if there are parts of their business that perhaps are not ready and where they need to focus before they take that jump into a new market. So that's sort of the first step. And it comes along with market research. Right? So internally, you're doing that assessment. You feel you're ready. You want to know whether or not the market is ready for you and whether or not you truly have an opportunity. So that things like feasibility studies, market selection, thinking about who your competition is, understanding the local laws and regulations, all of that initial work that is truly the foundation for success. No matter where you are in the world, where you're trying to go, is work that you have to do. It is worth investing time, energy, and resources on so you can get it right from the get-go. So that's sort of the first step. Then you have to think about your strategy, whether it is, I want to truly take an international expansion, a strategy for the organization as a whole, or we're deciding to go into one market, and what is that market entry strategy? Obviously, you need to think about how you're going to do it and what does it entail. The third piece of the puzzle is then how do we need to operate internally and what changes do we need to make? So we get into change management and transformation, those types of things. And then finally, execution, right? And it's not that necessarily you're doing everything in that order. things sort of happen in parallel many times, but those are sort of the four pillars of any international expansion that we work with our clients in order for it to be effective. There is really no difference in the process. What changes is the industry. What changes is what stage of that journey is a company in, and we sort of tailor our services and our approach to help them, get the things they need and sort of filling those gaps, depending on how far they've already gone.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. I mean, that's similar to somewhat similar to my process. So I work more in product commercialization and product launches. With occasionally it'll be a new geography in there, but it's usually a diagnostic phase, right? Let's just see where you're great, where things could be better, and this is really where you should be focusing your attention. And then from there, that usually follows into market research, customer research, capabilities assessments. For you, I imagine it's do you have local partners on the ground that logically would fit into what they offer, whether it's professional employment organization or for export business or licensing or franchisees, all those sorts of things kind of depend on the type of product. If it's if it's a service, if it's a commodity, if it's a finished good. Can you maybe go a little bit more into that? I think you mentioned on our prep call that there's different models for international market entry that I think you mentioned. Walk me through them, I guess, because I'm a little fuzzy on them.
Yeah, so let me address that first part of the partners, because I think one of the reasons that I started Factum Global is because I saw a significant gap in the market where many organizations that were eager to expand globally truly lacked that systematic approach to do it. And they just not only needed sort of a roadmap, but truly an understanding of how to partner locally and how to get from A to B, right? So that whole process of strategy, market research to execution and transformation. And we wanted to bring all that sort of under one roof, right? So we do have a very robust network of partners around the world that we tap into to help meet the needs of our clients, right? So when I was sitting in their seat, I was an executive for an organization before that was doing exactly what our clients are trying to do. I experienced firsthand the complexities of this global expansion stuff and how disjointed the assistance available was, right? And so you think about it, and Eric, I know you've experienced this, chambers of commerce, economic development agencies, strategy consultants, market researchers, tax advisors, logistics experts, cultural specialists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're trying to manage all of these in multiple markets at once. It becomes very, very challenging and fragmented. So you're putting the finger right on the thing, on the real aspect of partnerships and how important it is to have those networks in the countries that you're trying to get to. So it's very important to have that. But you're asking me about models, and there's a lot of ways of doing this. There are a lot of frameworks out there. I happen to be a believer in the Bartlett and Gauchal matrix because it simplifies the thinking, right? It's not the only thing, but it helps companies think about, do I want to be international? Do I want to be multi-domestic? Do I want to be global? Do I want to be transnational? And it's not like you're trying to get yourself into a frame and that you cannot exit it, but at least it guides your decision making, right? And so what it does is that it helps you to think about internationalization in terms of level of adaptability and the level of commitment that you're going to give to a market. So when you think about international organizations, these are companies that are focused on producing something in their home market that has value in other parts of the world. So they don't necessarily have to think about adapting their offerings very much. It's more about how do we get them to the customer wherever they are. But they are, if they're in the US, a US organization that happens to do business internationally, or a UK-based organization that happens to do business internationally, they're not trying to be global. They're not trying to open offices all over the world and become multi-domestic, right? A global organization, on the other hand, is thinking about how do we produce offerings that are appealing everywhere, right? So a good example of that would be a pharmaceutical company that is not about the appeal, but the use, right? So a drug is going to be effective no matter where you are, and you're producing something that is going to be needed around the world, right? So your strategy is going to be very different from someone that says, I want to produce things that are relevant in every place that I go to, and I'm going to really localize. So even at that level, thinking of that strategy, the use of partners and the way in which you do things is going to vary quite a lot. And we help our clients understand that so that they can invest their resources, energy, and financial resources in the right way.
And that's a really good point. I think you put a really good finger on it, that you really can't usually enter a new market without some constellation of partners, whether that's tax advisory, whether that's, labor experts, and actually depending on the type of entrant, you mentioned pharmaceuticals, it's, the same function, but there's different regulations. Others, it might be for supply chain reasons, that the cost of labor in a certain area is a lot lower, or the way of acquiring those materials is more local. You're seeing that a lot now with a lot of nearshoring, where why don't we build it on the same continent that it's being sold on? So it's, within the EU, that's pretty broad, and even North Africa. Within, the US MCA, present politics aside, there's a lot of those sorts of reasons why we shouldn't be shipping things on oceans or on planes. And it just does, it does make it a little bit easier or more strategic to say we're going to be entering, these 2 or 3 markets at a time, kind even one at a time, rather than we're going to be everything everywhere all at once. And do you see that with customers? Do you see that with clients? What kind of problems do they usually face, or are there stumbling blocks that your clients have hit before they seek you or outside help?
We see that a lot, and we also see organizations that unfortunately are picking markets just out of curiosity, or because a board
big
member
population
happens to have a house or something like that.
I could see that.
One of the biggest stumbling blocks is that assumption that a successful domestic strategy would actually translate automatically internationally, and the belief that because you're doing things so well in your home market, you can do the same thing elsewhere. I think clients don't realize sometimes that entering a new market requires fundamentally different approach that is truly tailored to a local culture. So we were talking about the actual offerings. Sometimes you don't need to tailor the offerings because maybe what you're producing is good, whatever you're going, like with pharmaceuticals, but you have to tailor your approach, right? You can even names, labels, all kinds of things, right? Local regulations. You have to think about the economic and regulatory realities of the places where you're going. So many organizations, unfortunately, tend to miss that. Another common issue is not having local partners, as you were expressing, or underestimating the importance of that cultural adaptation, which can lead to missteps in every step of the engagement, right? So compounding these challenges is sort of the fragmented nature of support available in the market that we were talking about a little bit earlier. I think that makes it even harder with many consultants and firms that are focusing only on one aspect of international expansion. And that makes it harder for companies to really understand how to navigate all these different things, right? That this disjointed approach can overwhelm companies as they're trying to do this. This is why we try to simplify the process for our clients. We offer an integrated solution that combines strategy, market research, execution, transformation, and that robust network of partners that can make it easier for an organization to really navigate all these complexities and reduce risk, right? It's essentially we become an extension of their teams, and we try to get them their answers that they need, the information they need, the insights that are data driven for them to make decisions on how to move forward.
Yeah, and that sort of goes back to your earlier comment about, it's because the CEO has a house there, or I sometimes see big population biases. So if you're a US firm, well, why would we enter Canada? It's so small when we can enter China or Brazil or India. And those are vastly further cultural distances. Yes. I mean, you're almost trading return for higher risk versus if you stick with, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, a lot of cultural similarities. They're not necessarily huge markets, but you sort of build that muscle of, okay, now we can work across multiple time zones. Okay, now we can multi-currency support versus, say, diving into the EU where you have 27 member nations and, 24 languages, variety of patchwork regulations to comply with. That's a much more complex, high risk of failure project than let's start small and build that capability and build the team. I imagine for you, it's like me, I want to leave the client better than I found them and have a capability to do this and run the business for a bit. And then in a few years, they say, hey, we're ready to do it again. let's do a deal. And so maybe that goes a little bit into what kinds of firms do you think you're well positioned to help? Are there particular sizes or, your ideal clients? What are the ones that you really have just really nailed it?
So again, we have a variety of clients, but our ideal client is an organization that understands that this is complex, that it's going to take time, that it's going to take commitment and resources, and that they're truly committed to it, right? That's our ideal client, whether they're a large organization or a small nonprofit organization. That's really not as relevant to us as it is the commitment. We want to make sure that the clients that come to Factum Global actually are successful in their international expansion. As you can imagine, their success is our success, right? If we help an organization successfully enter a new market, they're going to refer us to their colleagues, to other companies, their case studies. So we want to make sure that the organizations that we do business with are really serious about it. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations are enamored by the thought of international expansion, but many of them are truly not ready, right? This is why we always start with that assessment. We try to guide them. We also don't want to do a disservice, right? I mean, if you come to me and you ask me, hey, can you help me get into China? The answer is yes, but should you? And if the answer is no, I'm going to be the first to tell you, right? That this is not the time for you. Perhaps this is not the market. Have you thought about A, B, or C as an option? Because that's truly what we're in the business of doing. We're trying to make sure that our clients are successful.
Yeah, and I think that totally jives with my experience too, where I probably turned down about 75% of projects that cross my desk because it's just you're asking for things that aren't possible or your timeframes are unrealistic. And I think working with clients that want to have that objective advice, like I think for advisory firms, it's really, you're almost like a doctor for business, right? Or consulting firms are kind of like doctors for business, that you're there, you're outside of the performance review cycle, or outside of the company politics. You can kind of be that therapist and say, so tell me how you arrived at that goal, or why is this time frame important versus taking, and I often say, slow down to speed up. If you rush into it, there's a better chance of failure or a higher chance of failure versus if we do this deliberately, because it's kind of a one-way door decision. Like once you've entered a market and it fails, you can't really do it again. You could, but a decade later. And so what would you say are some of the stumbling blocks that your clients hit before they come to you or seek outside help? Are there, have they tried it and it wasn't really working, or the partner they thought they had in that market didn't pan out? Or, how do they find you? Like what's the is it the CEO or is it the chief strategy officer? Like what are the main project sponsors that kind of reach out?
As we were discussing earlier a little bit, that sort of area of assumptions that a successful domestic strategy will automatically work internationally is one of those stumbling blocks, right? Is that mentality that, or lack of knowledge of the need to truly adapt what you're doing to the markets where you're trying to go. And what we were talking about, sort of that lack of knowledge or for networks locally and the need to local partners, et cetera. It's another one that we find as stumbling blocks. They come to us in different ways. Look, we have clients that are very sophisticated, right? Not every client that comes to us because they don't know how to do this. I have clients that are very good
patient.
Yeah, there are clients that are very good at the internationalization and they understand that they've done it before, but precisely because they understand that they need help and they need added capacity, right? And no matter how large you are, even in multinational, multi-billion-dollar organizations, there are silos, right? There are a lot of divisions within those companies that are trying to do things and they face barriers and they have lack of capacity or lack of understanding on a particular area, right? We're currently working with a multi-billion-dollar company that has expanded all over the world, but has been struggling in the Middle East. So they came to us and they said, hey, can you help us navigate this? Because we've tried our way and it's not working. And could you do an assessment of what might be going wrong and help us understand what we can do differently, right? So it's all across the spectrum, right? From the ones that truly don't know how to do this and acknowledge that and say, hey, we know we need to do this or we want to do this, but we need help to make sure that we're doing the right thing, to the ones that are like, we want to do it, we're doing it, we're going to do it, but something is not working. Let's get a second set of eyes on this from someone who knows how to do this thing.
Yeah, and I've certainly had clients that are good patients, and it's how can we do it better or faster. But then other times you have clients that have said, yeah, we've tried this, we tried that, it didn't work. We need some help here. And the beauty of it is that, because you're outside of that politic, you can often cut through all of those silos. And I think most of our types of work, you really you're coming from a place of empathy, and you're really trying to interview people in a place of psychological safety to say, hey, I can anonymize this feedback and kind of bring it to the attention of the executives and the board and say, hey, this is what we're hearing. So what I'm hearing is blank. And then it's no one's job is on the line. It's kind of you're almost like integrating a lot of those sorts of hard things that are hard to say through your usual reporting chain. And so are there particular successes you're really proud of? Like, are there particular what makes for a successful market entry? Are there some that just did it right, did it deliberately? Like I said, for my clients, sometimes it's telling them to slow down, to speed up, and just taking a step back and saying this is going to be a 2-year thing, not a 2-month thing. Where do you see that?
To me, success is truly accomplishing what the client wants to do in a way that's realistic, that reduces risk, and increases their chance of success and their ability to generate impact in places that they're going, right? And every organization finds that differently. And we work with our clients to define success before we even get started so that we can measure it. Because what's successful for one organization is not successful for another, right? So we have clients that say, hey, can you help us open an office in Mexico? Sure, we can. And once it's open, we succeeded. But is that as far as you want to go? What do you want to do with the office? What is the intent?
Yeah.
How are you going to measure?
How do you measure ROI? Yeah.
Right. And so, and for some, that's important. For others is, no, we needed to have the office there just to amplify our, in-person sort of ability to do things. Like in the case of nonprofit organizations, we see this often, right? The accomplishment of having people on the ground itself to support the members that they have in a particular country is an accomplishment in and of itself. And then they build on that, right? And they try to figure out how do we sustain and how do we do better and how do we measure better. But for some other organizations from the get-go, they have very specific metrics they're trying to achieve. They're trying to do things in a way that they have done perhaps in other markets they've entered. And so success is defined differently. But for us is, have we done what the client wanted to do? And have we been able to guide them and to ensure that what they believe is success is truly what's going to make them successful, right? So we ask the hard questions. Talking about Eric, you sort of act as this unbiased entity that asks the difficult questions, that is able to provide advice that we've seen other organizations perhaps on things that we've seen other organizations do and succeed with. And we remove that bias, right? Because as you're saying, you're not in the politics. You're not ingrained in the company. You don't have this bias that you develop just because it's your organization and you've done certain things a certain way.
Right. No, I think that makes sense. I think any business owner, as you can probably attest to, I can certainly say I have my own ego veil and I have my own advisors for numbers and letters that, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, thinking of adding this capability. What do you think? And I think it's important for any business leader to have that level of humility and self-awareness to say, hey, we're doing these things great, but we don't really know what, being aware of that Dunning-Kruger effect and being aware that there are some things we don't know. If we want to, as you said, enter a market, do you have anyone from that country on your team? Right? Or are there any red flags, I guess, you've come across where somebody wants to enter a market because, I get for product development, hey, we should do something with crypto. Hey, we should do something with AI. And it's like, well, you're a bicycle company. Like, are your clients asking for it? As you said, with the industry associations, and this happened to me when I worked with a PMI, which I think was also one of your clients, was, hey, we have people that are joining in all these geographies. We need to have a better strategy for them. Do you see, the good, the bad, and the ugly? Are there particular things to watch out for, or messages for business leaders that, yes, it sounds, you always want to run a bigger company, and I think we should help our clients doing that, but we also want to make sure they don't run off a cliff and devote too much of the organization's resources without some clear stage gates or, go, no go type, positions. So we've done the diagnostic, we've done the research. It's not really a slam dunk. How do you find that sort of balance of coachability and reality? When people want to always grow, and sometimes it's like a not right now, or are there other things that kind of go through your mind when you see those situations?
Yeah, I mean, you're sort of asking me a lot in that question. That's a very charged question.
You don't have to be specific. I mean,
you asked about good, bad, the ugly. Let's start there. Good market entries are methodical and well researched, right? We can agree on that. You've been saying it. I've said it a couple of times just in this discussion. And I'll give you an example. We worked recently with a company that was expanding in Southeast Asia, and they had done some research, but they were not necessarily sure that the research was enough to make decisions. We validated that, and we sort of fill in the gaps and help them build the local partnerships that they needed. And they successfully launched in Vietnam. They're starting to scale into neighboring countries, and they're getting some good traction. So that's related to your success question. But so those are good stories, right? It's like when we've done the research, but is it well done? Yeah. Did we answer all the questions? What else should we be asking ourselves? That is good management. And it comes with that humility that you were talking about. The bad, a lot of us tend to overestimate our readiness and underestimate the competition.
That's a good point.
And so a client entering Europe, for example, it tends to underestimate how complicated the EU is, right? And you were talking about that. And it's many markets within one, and yet I hear a lot of my potential clients talk about that they want to enter the EU market, or they want to enter the Latin American market. Even the US is 50 markets within a market, right?
Yeah.
At least.
I mean, every state has different regulations and reporting requirements. And yeah.
So, when you sort of ignore those things and you don't have a clear differentiation strategy and understand how you need to adopt and restrain financially so that you can do things in a moderated risk kind of way, it tends to turn bad.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then in terms of the ugly, we've all heard the horror stories, Eric, and I know that you have a few, but I can think, for example, of Target. You remember when they tried to expand into Canada, and they launched very quickly because I cannot say what the management was thinking, but I would assume that they were thinking Target, Canada
not
is
the
a
brand,
transition, is not this different from the US. And they launched very quickly without properly addressing the supply chain challenges that are very unique to Canada. And as we all know, that led to empty shelves and dissatisfied customers, and they ended up having to exit the market entirely. And so we see these even with big, very sophisticated companies.
Oh yeah.
Imagine what we're talking about startups, or we're talking about smaller firms or nonprofit organizations. They have to be careful because the impact can be even greater.
Yeah, you don't want to bet the farm. I mean, I think it's companies in a good, with good cash flow, with a lot of extra capital to take those risks, but it's not a save the company type of thing. And actually, when you're thinking about what not to do, the two examples that came to mind, especially for Europe, Domino's Pizza tried to enter Italy in the delivery pizza business. And you're like, okay, well, Italy has been making pizza for a long time. If you go to Italy, there's a pizza place literally every block. So it's a pretty tough sell to say, those incumbents, well, we have the global brand, and the Italians will come to us. And you're like, yeah, but they're at the expense of not going to their grandmother's restaurant, right? Or there's a much more familial ties to these places than I think a lot of international brands don't realize when they're entering a market. And especially in China too, guanxi, the idea of relationships that, who are you? Unless you have a local partner, you're not going to get as much traction. And then the other example I thought would be kind of funny was, I think it was like Frito-Lay was trying to launch a chip in Iberia. And so they treated Iberia as one unit, not recognized. And so they said, okay, we'll just put jamon flavored chips, jamon in Espanol, and in Portuguese, jamon means allegedly or supposedly in Spanish. So they tried to have both words for jamon in ham in Portuguese and Spanish, but then when the Spaniards looked at it, it said chips, ham, allegedly. So sometimes, you have to do your localization research. And as you kind of mentioned, like, I think with Vietnam is a great example. Pick a country that's a good jumping off point for the rest of the region. So they have good air connectivity. Ideally, there's a free trade pact. So with ASEAN or a CONOSUR or, obviously the EU, just kind of get a taste of how, let's at least get that muscle, started. So whether that's, have a secondary, office in Dublin or Amsterdam or Barcelona, or someplace where you can at least get to know the local market. And it won't be, a huge impact on your balance sheet in the first few years. But as you're building that capability and working, I think for a lot of teams, the big step function is working across time zones or across different work cultures. So like back when I was at Flyer 5 years ago, they were working with Qatar Airways. So that's a 10-hour time difference, and it's a Muslim country. So the work week is Sunday through Thursday. So you're already pretty narrow gap of when you can actually meet concurrently. And by the way, you're only 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week concurrently. So that took a little bit of adapting to get used to it for one of their clients. But I've seen this also with adding a European or even Indian office. And that's even trickier for folks in the US because it can be, up to a 12.5-hour time change. So when you're thinking about how does this company work across geographies, if it's under 9 hours or so, you can usually do a green zone. I've seen companies do that where like, here are the 2 hours a day bias meetings for those geographies to connect, or just get really good at asynchronous and having a template for Slack updates and daily stand-ups and things like that, where teams can hand off work on a regular basis. So you're not having daily stand-ups where someone's taking a call at 3 a.m. That's a recipe for me. In my mind, that's a recipe for burnout. Yeah, on either side. Quality will suffer and the culture will suffer. And so there's some of those sorts of, when you're thinking about adding new offices, it's always like, well, where and why? And as you probably do with your market research, you probably look at 20 or 30 different markets and say, well, here, let's prioritize. And if it's a sales-driven expansion versus a supply chain versus human capital, those sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly, Eric. And I was trying to reference to that earlier, which is sort of that change management transformation piece, right? Mm-hmm. How does adding that new country to your portfolio, to your organization, impact the organization as a whole? And if you're not thinking about it, you're going to have problems, right? It's just simple. It's not only about the external changes. Yes, we have new office. We did this externally to our home office, but what is the impact internally? How do we have to transform for success? And that has implications on everything. Obviously, culture, most and foremost, but also in terms of, and you were talking about some of this when you talk about HR, but your people, your systems, your processes, and even the way in which you interact every day. So that's critical. I couldn't agree more.
And on the flip side, I've seen successes where it's really enhanced the culture. Like I've seen where some clients and companies have done a very good job of saying, hey, if you want to do a 2-month stint in the other office and just get to know the folks there, that is absolutely worth it because you get to know them as people. You get to see kind of how the rhythms of the office work. And a lot of folks want to come to the home office as well and be visible and meet their supervisors or their the VPs. And so trying to create that sort of framework for cross-cultural exchange. Like I know Accenture had this in spades. We had folks from India, from Europe come all the time onto projects. And it was a really good, I think it really enhanced the culture. So it wasn't like, okay, you're over there doing your thing, just report quarterly, earnings and that's it. I think creating that sort of bridge can really help a company and help them think about what's next and how to expand within both regions. And this can often happen as a result of an acquisition too. Have you had a few clients like that where, hey, we're thinking of acquiring a company wholesale. They have a very good, great product overlap. So we would be selling their products in our geography and vice versa. Do you work more with just straight up organic expansion, or do you also do inorganic expansion too, where you're looking to buy a target company?
We do both, but our involvement with mergers and acquisitions is sort of on the side. It's more involved in the transformation and change that happens internally to the organization. Although we also have helped sort of in identifying potential targets for acquisition, but we're not part of the actual acquisition of a company. We don't do that. That's not part of what we offer. We have partners that do it, but we help in identifying potential targets. We help with sort of the research aspect of things, then we hand it off. And when a transaction does happen and it comes back to execution and the companies are trying to merge, then we do offer transformation and change management services to try to help them through that transition. And that encompasses all the things that we've been talking about, right? In ensuring that things are in order, that two cultures that are merging are actually doing so in a systematic way, strategic way. And there are so many decisions that these organizations have to make at that point, right? It's not only cultural differences from the fact of we're a US company that just purchased an Argentinian company, which is a challenge in and of itself, but it's also the corporate culture of each one of those organizations. And it's thinking about all the systems and processes that are in place, the people and how they're going to be impacted, the sort of shift of power and all the things that Eric, that take place. So it adds a lot of complexity. So we play in the space when that happens, but we're not, merger and acquisition consultants. So that part we don't touch directly.
No, and then maybe that'll be a good topic for another episode. I agree. Like I've worked on M&A both pre and post deal, but that is a very specialized area of consulting. Like I remember working on a project where a US company bought a UK company, and they had great product overlap, like very good product synergies, but it really was a cultural integration question. So we ended up actually working with the client to say, yes, people in Europe get more time off, but other types of benefits are better in the US. Leveling everyone up actually is going to make everyone row in the same direction. So rather than them being upset about the merger, it actually worked in their favor, because then it actually added a boost to morale. It's a one-time hit in cost, but if you have better retention and you have more engaged employees, that actually worked out pretty well. And then, when you think about 4 out of 5 mergers don't succeed, there are some success stories there. But I agree that the pricing of the deal and getting those sides together, that is a more kind of get into the banking sector. That's where it's much more specialized for get there.
It's very specialized. We may go as far as to suggest that an acquisition may be a good way to enter a market because it reduces the time to market, and there are a lot of benefits that we can discuss.
It's more turnkey. Yeah,
right. But we don't necessarily get involved in those transactions.
That's fair. Well, shifting gears, how do consultants get hired at your firm? What's your recruitment process look like?
Actually, a pretty rigorous recruitment process. We pride ourselves in the level of service that we provide. We look for consultants that are or have strong backgrounds in international business, cross-cultural communication skills, and experience in market entry, that they've done this before. We also, for sort of the junior support positions, look for a lot for data analytics and research capabilities. Right. But in general, the process typically includes multiple interviews, case studies. We are looking for people who are a good fit culturally, and we sort of assume that by the time that we're going to hire somebody, the technical aspect of what they need to be doing is being covered. So we focus a lot on the soft skills, on the cultural fit, and our ability to put them in front of a client. So we're looking for people who are self-driven, that are good working independently, that are reliable, and that have a very high level of quality in the things that they do. We recruit people from around the world, depending on the needs that we have. We try to walk the walk. We are helping organizations expand internationally. So we do have people ourselves in different parts of the world. And that also gives us sort of an advantage in how we think about this recruiting process, because we put sometimes in place even just questions or cases or practices from other parts that we learn as we interact with our staff in other parts of the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, having people that have bi or trilingual support, or at least context in the regions that you're working in, that's how you imagine bring in local partners. Is someone's coming with a great network, and I think good consultants know that you're only as good as your network. That I often tell my clients, like, hey, I'm not the right person to answer that question, but I know who does. and I can set up a call with a subject matter expert and someone who's done it a million times. They're chief commercial officer in the industry that you're looking to play in, not competitive, but that sort of connection I think can make it a lot easier for a client and also for your team to kind of feel a greater degree of trust, or that we don't necessarily have to be the smartest people in the room. Like I've had some consulting firms, hey, we know better. I often tell my clients, I'm like, your business better than I do, but my hope is that I can plug you into the folks that have the super specialized area, and you're part of this for my network. How to approach this very specific problem that it's often in dovetail with a variety of other initiatives they're trying to do. You think about strategic priorities, it's like usually quarter to quarter, but like how do you help them kind of understand it's taking the long game? It's harder for bigger companies. I think smaller companies are, especially if they're very patient investors, they're willing to take more of those risks and willing to wait and see a little bit longer. But yeah, if it depends on how you're under the gun or not. When you mentioned soft skills, are there particular soft skills that you think are the most valuable for international market entry consultant?
To me, the number one is culture adaptability, having that global mindset, that understanding of humility that you were talking about, that your way is not the only way.
Yeah, not getting too attached to your own ideas. I think that is a very good observation, that I think good advisors or consultants will have ideas, but they're not so gung-ho about it, and they're willing to listen and integrate and have that humility to say, like, these are ideas, you don't have to implement them. Or you can say, I've had some instances with executives, take the idea. If it works, it was your idea. If it doesn't, blame me. Like it kind of de-risks it for them. I can't tell you how many times I've made risk issue matrices, prioritize what's the likelihood of it happening, what's the impact of it happening, how much time and attention should we spend on it. So you're not saying, oh, well, what if aliens invade? What if a meteor strikes? Like that's high impact but very low probability. But what happens if a tariff happens? What happens if a regulatory initiative that's being debated in that local market passes? Right, so you have things like GDPR or GPSR in the EU now. Does that change the strategy? Does that how does that change the market entry? And I think just being flexible with that those sorts of things will change.
Adaptability is the number one thing in this business, because there's no perfect strategy. Things change daily. Here in the US, we're about to enter a new presidency, and we don't know how things are going to change with that, and we're all watching and waiting to see how things may change, and they may change in some areas for good, and others perhaps for challenges, but you have to navigate those things, right? It's not the first time, it won't be the next time. We go through all these cycles on a regular basis where everyone talks about deglobalization, and I don't believe in it. I just believe that we are in a world that is in constant change. There will be new alliances. There will be new ways of doing things. You spoke about nearshoring. That is one of the things that is happening as a result of the changes that we're seeing around the world. But it's not the first time either. So it's that understanding. Going back to your question of the skills, understanding that. The ability to see that you have to be adaptable and that you have to react to the changes is critical for anyone in this business.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, that both looking at historical examples, has this ever happened before? That helps you quantify and kind of scope the risk a lot better than this has never happened. But at the same time, with that adaptability, I often call it being planful enough. Like we've thought about it enough that if this happens, the most likely scenarios happen, we have a playbook. Like a strategy is a collection of plans. It's not just one plan. But you can't boil the ocean. So that's why I use the meteor and alien strikes. It's like we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. And sometimes you do have to, I think as a good consultant or advisor, say this is the right amount to think of headspace to think about a particular threat or particular whether it's competition, whether it's regulatory, whether it's supply chain. This is kind of where we're at a good spot. We're not making decisions in an emotionally charged or reactionary frame, but you don't want to necessarily go completely off the path. So
yeah, but you know what's interesting about that, Eric, and I don't know if it happens to you with your clients, is one of the hardest things for us to quote unquote sell is the research phase of things. It's like people are ready to jump into things, right? They just want to do it. And when they see the price tag, no matter how big or small it is, it's too much anyway, because they don't want to spend the money on that. And they underestimate the expense and the risk that they're taking by not doing that, by not having that information, by not making decisions based on data. And they end up making mistakes that are a lot more costly than spending the few dollars on truly understanding what they're about to do and being able to analyze all the variables. It's counterintuitive, but it's very interesting. So
that has definitely come across before in some negotiations with potential clients, is that this is sort of like preventative health or insurance. And the folks that tend to be, if you think just in terms of regular health, like the folks that tend to be the most willing to look at, options of preventing something from happening or insuring it, is people who have had a misstep before. They've had a health scare, or they've had an injury. And so they know that was not a great outcome the last time. I'm going to do it right this time and actually go to my physicals, get my blood tests, and so you see, like, I often find a lot of clients come to have a conversation after something has not gone according to plan. And that's true of no business owner who's ever said everything's going great, amazingly. I don't believe that. Like, it's great when you have good years. I think that's definitely possible. But I think the best clients tend to be the ones that say, hey, these are going great. We made this mistake 3 years ago. I don't want to repeat it. Let's do this right. And that's where I find that humility and that trust building can be a lot. It's a better fit, for both of us. We're getting close to the top of the hour. Are there any other parting wisdom or other things that you kind of want to mention about Factum? Like, what are your plans for the year? I'd love to make it easier for folks to find you. So if there's better ways to reach you, like what's on your mind for 2025?
Well, Eric, we're thinking a lot about the use of technology, and particularly AI, in what we do. So we are trying to, and we've been working hard starting last year, to adapt tools that are going to make us more effective, that are going to help us save money, and therefore we can pass some of the cost savings to our clients.
Oh, yeah.
But we're also thinking about externally, making sure that they have the tools that they need in order to be successful, and how to leverage technology. That's top of mind for me in this year. Yep. In terms of how to find us, it's easy. www.factumglobal.com.
Great.
We're also on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram. But going to the website is very easy. There is a button, just connect and schedule a meeting. I can be reached via LinkedIn and schedule a consultation very easily. But I want to thank you for the time. It's been great talking to you about this. It's the second time when we did the prep. It was equally interesting. And I can talk to you about this for hours, because you're in the same space. You understand it very well. And it's always fun. And I hope it's helpful for your audience. I
think this has been fantastic.
Listeners will get some value of our conversation. And I appreciate the invitation.